What's new, kangaroos?
Long story short, I unfortunately had to give up piano and voice lessons for the time being. Not because I don't love them, I still love them, I'll always love them, but because my health was too bad. It's been going downhill, people. It's gone way downhill. I had a doctor's appointment today. I ended up crying. You can probably tell by looking at my face. Current treatment plan. They're also retesting me to see if my UC is in fact in remission, because they're not sure it is. I'm waiting for some results for infections and calprotectin. Calprotectin is what tells you in your stool sample if your intestine is inflamed. We have 3 inflammation markers: C-reactive protein in the blood, calprotectin in the stool, and then of course inflammation in the biopsies and the colonoscopy, and then you can see it if you're given imaging. Anyways, I just wanted to say that District 8's alive and well, and so am I. It's probably just gonna be a yap sesh about how I'm feeling. Might as well explain to all of you what ulcerative colitis is. There's a whole unblended strawberry in the middle of the... whatever. I'm watching Lyme Diaries with Amelia Suarez. Good morning, moods. That did not sound like me at all. Ulcerative colitis is a form of inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD for short. It takes place in the large intestine and causes pseudopolyps and ulcers to form. The other form of IBD is called Crohn's disease, which takes place in the small intestine and causes thickening of the walls of the intestine. Basic ways to differentiate: ulcerative colitis comes on very quickly. One day you're fine, the next day you're not. Crohn's disease can take years of buildup to display itself, and just for the gene, if you have the gene, to express itself. So ulcerative colitis is not the same as IBS. IBD and IBS are 2 very different things. I have IBD. I sort of have IBS, but it's not. That's the closest diagnosis they have to what my nerve damage is. But IBD has several forms of treatment. We've made leaps and bounds in treatment even since I got diagnosed. The treatment hierarchy basically goes like this, and certain treatments are more effective for Crohn's or ulcerative colitis than they are for the other. First line is always regardless of whether you have Crohn's or UC. We start with something called mesalamine, which is basically the first line of treatment. Just pills you swallow once a day. Or I did them 3 times a day when I was first diagnosed. And then if that doesn't work, they add on a steroid, typically prednisone, which really messed up my skin for a long time. If prednisone does not succeed, they have something called immunomodulators, which are the line of treatment for moderate ulcerative colitis. They don't use them very frequently anymore. Hey, Patty. Because they take a long time to work, but they were the first medication invented for ulcerative colitis, so it used to be immunomodulators and then a colectomy if that didn't work. Above immunomodulators, you have biologics, which is your Remicade, Humira, Entyvio, Stelara, Skyrizi. Those are the ones we have. You've probably seen a lot of Skyrizi commercials lately because they're on TV a lot. And then if those don't succeed, you go to what are called JAK inhibitors, which we have 2 of those, Xeljanz and Rinvoq. I'm on Rinvoq. And then we have a separate pill called Velsipity, which isn't really it doesn't fit into one of the main categories. And then you have surgery, which for Crohn's patients, you cannot get your entire small intestine removed, so they remove the portion of the bowel that's inflamed because the entire small bowel isn't inflamed at the same time. And that's what we call a partial colectomy. But with Crohn's, you have to get a ostomy bag, which is a bag that essentially comes into a gap in the stomach and fills up with fecal matter. That sounds gross, I know, but it works. With ulcerative colitis, however, you can get the entire intestine removed, and you would get what's called a J pouch, which is sort of an internal ostomy where the small intestine is pulled down and connected to the remaining portion of the rectum. A few things to know about the medication. Biologics work by inhibiting something called TNF-alpha, or the tumor necrosis factor, which controls inflammation throughout the whole body, whereas JAK inhibitors sort of clamp down on inflammation before they start, which makes them generally less immune suppressing. I was on biologics for a long time. Biologics are always infused or injected, and they were very immune suppressing, so I'm really glad that Rinvoq isn't. I mean, of course, my symptoms are bad, so I live at home, but I've definitely seen less generalized infections than on Rinvoq than I did when I was on biologics. I was on Remicade and then Entyvio. It is worth noting that, as I said earlier, Stelara and Skyrizi tend to work better on Crohn's disease than they do on ulcerative colitis. Trial antibiotic salvage therapy, which is the final thing you do to sort of prevent a colectomy, works better on Crohn's disease. Antibiotics can be a long-time treatment for Crohn's disease, but with ulcerative colitis, you can only be on them for a short amount of time, mostly because antibiotics are very risky with UC, because they can set our gut out of balance and push us over into a flare, which is not something we want to have happen. There's also diets you do that can change. There's a low fiber diet, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Common triggers, in addition to fiber, are dairy, sugar, fried things. Everyone has unique triggers, so when I was first diagnosed, I was put on a low fiber diet, and I could not eat anything because the list was so restrictive. But then I found out that uniquely dairy is not a trigger for me. The only things that are triggers for me are cooked tomato, which is not a common trigger. So no tomato soup, tomato sauce, pizza. Those are no-goes. And then I can't have a lot of sugar. I can have some, but I cannot have an extreme amount. And then I can't have fried things, which is fine most of the year, because other than when I'm at the amusement park, I don't really ever have fried things. That's been a bit of a change, but nothing else has affected me. I'm very lucky that way. When I'm in a flare, I cannot eat at all just because I have really bad flare-ups, so I can't eat or drink. The only flare I was ever in, I spent all day and night in the bathroom having liquidy bowel movements and throwing up at the same time, which sounds extremely nasty, I know, but I'm used to talking about these things as the thing, because at a certain period of time, it just doesn't affect you anymore. Ulcerative colitis can be very isolating. It causes a lot of accidents in public, bathroom accidents. Notoriously, Crohn's and UC are not the most accessible diseases. Accessibility is a really hard thing for the whole disabled community, especially when it comes to bathrooms, because even if you don't have Crohn's or UC, which you always are required to use the bathroom when you have that, people who are maybe wheelchair users, for instance, can't go to the bathroom on public spaces. Like, for instance, planes are very inaccessible. The bathrooms are not accessible, which is an unfortunate thing, and I think we need to do a better job of talking about accessibility. Also, places like Disney World, which I was lucky enough to be able to attend, are not accessible either. Disney does not provide accessibility service to anyone other than those with autism. I do have a pass that allows me to use the bathroom in certain places from the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. Shout out to them. I got it because of my activism with them. I'm in this sort of speaking out for the disabled community portion of the activism, which is definitely a hard thing to do. And speaking up was very hard for me. But I need to speak up for those who can't. I'm white, which means that I can speak up on behalf of those who are people of color, and I have a lot less oppression placed upon me than those who are people of color or transgender individuals. The reality of the situation is that I am a queer disabled female, but I'm white and I'm cisgender and I'm economically well off, which gives me a lot of privileges and means that I feel the need to speak up for others. That's not me saying that, oh, if you have these privileges, you have to speak up, because I understand speaking up can be scary, but I'm just explaining why I specifically choose to speak up. Yeah, that's really it for inflammatory bowel disease. Symptoms include, and I'm mostly speaking for UC here because the symptoms for Crohn's are more commonly shown via colonoscopy, but you don't necessarily exhibit them the same way. With Crohn's, you do experience a lot of malnourishment and growth. People with Crohn's disease often end up developing short stature or dwarfism because their bodies are not given the nutrients they need to grow. Ulcerative colitis more causes liquidy bowel movements, bloody bowel movements. Sometimes the bowel movements are entirely bloody. Achy joints, vomiting. Those are about the most common symptoms. But yeah, this is just sort of an explanation about what ulcerative colitis is. And I'm not sharing all of this to scare you, but I'm just sharing this because mainstream media portrays disabilities, especially those involving bodily functions, as something to be ashamed of or a joke. And I think that is a lot to blame for the discrimination people with inflammatory bowel disease face. But it's not. If we start talking about these things similarly to mental health, they're going to become less scary and less taboo. And we can look at things from a scientific perspective and not a, oh my God, this is so funny, or oh my God, that's disgusting perspective. So I think that starts with me, and I'm going to do my best to speak out and talk about my illnesses and my medical conditions and my disabilities, because at the end of the day, I feel ready to do that. Tell someone you love them today. Maybe have the person be yourself. Sing like there's no one watching. Take down a transcript and always remember to peel up the mellow.